Welcome to the bridge. My name is Brandon, and I'm joined by my co-host and friend Zach. And we have another album this week. Quite one that I think we're both interested in and super excited to get talking about. But before we do, what are you drinking today, Zach?
No beer this week. Sticking to the green tea. The weather's warming up over here, so sort of on a bit of a health kick
Yeah,
after the winter blues.
I'm back on the Americana, so that's my diet version lattes.
Okay, a diet person lattes.
And replace the milk with water, and then there we go.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I always go for black coffee. You can't go wrong with black coffee.
Yeah, I can't
Sometimes
really.
the bitterness just wakes you up in the morning, and when you dilute it with creamy milk,
Well, it's
yeah,
not black then; it's just milk in it.
yeah, it's more like milk with coffee rather than coffee.
Very good. Yeah, this week we're covering the album For the First Time by Black Country New Road, a British band. Um, Going into this, I had kind of heard the rumblings of this album. It was kind of getting good reviews, I think, uh, and I kept on hearing bands and similarities that I was a big fan of. So I kind of got my nose turned towards this album kind of early, but I hadn't really stuck my fingers into the band or any of the singles they released until this album.
What similarities did you hear about?
I heard a bit Slint mostly was the big comparison, and Black Midi.
And you're a big Slint fan, yeah?
Yeah, one of my I guess I would say my favorite album, if not up there in that echelon, is Spiderland, which is a Slint album from the '90s. Huge fan of that. Definitely up my alley. It's kind of like a mathy kind of alternative rock that kind of like slips into post-hardcore a little bit.
Yeah, it's really syncopated and angular, like the weird timing and kind of discordant sounds.
Yeah, a lot of dissonance here that they'll play
Yeah.
with, kind of like reminiscence of some noise rock from the same era. So going into this, I was kind of expecting something to that degree. I guess I wasn't that far off. I was expecting like a math rock kind of album, and I think that this kind of fits into that pocket, but it is more than kind of what I was expecting. They weren't super glued to those comparisons as I thought they might have been, and some people have critiqued them for being, but I kind of disagree. But we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, really, they've been criticized for
Being too degenerate of a band's like Slint and Black Midi.
too derivative, yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. Thank you. Yeah, too derivative of Black Midi and Slint, and they kind of got that critique. But I would argue that they're different, even though there's definitely like inspiration and even name drops in this album to both those bands.
Yeah, I never dug super deep into the lyrics, but I did pick up on the Black Midi illusion. Yeah, so the band is a 7-piece collective,
Right.
and I think part of what makes their sound unique is that they are an ensemble of classically trained jazz musicians and then just people who are self-taught, autodidacts. And so the combination of the classically trained jazz musicians and then the sort of post-punk influenced autodidact self-taught musicians makes for a really compelling combination.
But yeah, there's 3 women and 4 guys. This is also their debut album. So the British band, Black Country, obviously is a part of the British Midlands. But another thing a little more prevalent is they were in a band before this as a seven piece, but I believe the lead singer got in trouble for sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, something along that. I didn't really dive into it, so they left the band. The band kind of is left behind, and they pick up Luke Mark who is the guitarist on the album, and this is kind of the album that came out of it.
Yeah, they developed their sound in all the songs just performing live, and I think Black Midi sort of took them under their wing a bit and helped share their platform, get them gigs, and give them advice and so on. And so,
By the way, did you happen to look up what these guys look like?
no, why?
Because they look like they're straight out of like an 80s boy band or an episode of Saved by the Bell. There's some promotional pictures there on Google that I was seeing, and I was like, this is not what I thought these guys looked like. They're a little hipster, I guess. Say.
Their lips are, yeah. I mean, they're young 20-somethings living in southern UK.
Yeah, I guess what do I expect, right?
Yeah.
All right, but let's get into the album a little bit, I guess. Unless there's anything else you wanted to comment on the band.
No, that's it.
So, the opening is called very tongue-in-cheek instrumental, and it's a banger. I love the drums opening up this album. It's like hot fire, like setting in for us the circular rhythm, joined eventually with a synth and with the polyrhythms. Gave this like vaguely like African or Middle Eastern kind of inspiration, I think, going on in this beginning track. It's like it kind of sets this precedent for what is going to happen a lot on this album, which is a lot of build and crescendo song structures.
Yeah. This one doesn't have as much open space as what occurs on the later tracks,
Right.
but it certainly follows this oscillating sound structure, yeah.
Once the guitar comes in on this, it's very math rock. It doesn't control the song, the guitar, but because it doesn't really get a chance to, because eventually, like all the members of the band are like it's slowly adding like on top of this musical swirling rhythm. With the sax comes in, occasional drum fills, just using the top hats and keeping the snare rhythm going. I thought this was immediate sign to me that the drummer on this album is fantastic. Immediately skillful and technical right outside right out of the gate.
Yeah, he's super technical. He's keeping everybody's time. Like you can, as soon as there's a change in the drum line, another instrument is introduced into the song.
Yeah, I love this opening. It felt like you're like moshing and shoving your way through like this light show that's making you disorientated and confused, but you're hyped up on adrenaline at the same time. It's just like this no wave sax that is prevalent throughout this album as well, which is another one of the big inspirations I see on the album is that New York no wave scene. This just felt like a love letter to that at points in the song, and even on this album. So far, first track in, you got math rock, we got alternative rock, we got like this post punk vibe, we got this post rock vibe, and this like no wave saxophone kind of solo stuff going on, which is like hitting every one of my loves when it comes to music. This is like it's perfect branding music. I couldn't help but get drawn to this when picking the albums for this week. There are some other albums that we've decided that we're going to talk about on a future date that was super interesting me, but I just knew that I had to come back to this because I had listened to this opening track, this instrumental, and I was blown away by it. And I was like, I got to listen to this album. I got to go get the full treatment and a full review because I was super excited.
I like how, yeah, each of the instruments has their own moment in the sun, and they use it during those sort of breakdown moments when the crescendo dips down and everything fade out.
Mhm.
But then there'll be one instrument that'll hold a rhythm.
How did you feel about the saxophone on this album?
Yeah, it was amazing how the sax player is able to be groovy and then for instance, in this song, after the first crescendo dies down, he holds the notes really long and blows them really hard, and it creates this dissonant sound.
Mhm.
And he has a great range of sounds that he's able to make with the saxophone.
Right. I like the type of saxophone playing here and how it's incorporated into the music. Again, is so no wave to me that it's like jumping off the page of like how inspired they obviously are by that scene by like Lydia Lunch and James Chance. By James Chance and Lydia Lunch is like that kind of like placement in the song and the energy that the sax can give in this kind of like punk atmosphere uh, is really fun and really kind of visceral at other times and sinister at other times and groovy in other times.
Yeah, like a job you would expect would be delegated to a guitar. Like, okay, create a bunch of distortion and hold the notes really long in this section. They give to the saxophone instead, but then sometimes the guitar will play that role, and it's this back and forth between the different instruments, especially the saxophone and the guitar. I find is very compelling,
Right. I think
and it highlights the combination of jazz and post punk that is definitive of their sound. And
right.
not derivative at all, in my opinion. It's their own spin on what is two established genres.
I think they go on to prove that of themselves in some of the other tracks as well. So Saturn France is the single that was released first and that caught a lot of people's attention to the band. This is one of the reasons maybe that they get that critique because the guitar work on this song is practically identical to something that you would hear on a Slint album.
Yeah, it's the song that reminds me of Spiderland the most.
Right. It's mostly the guitar because it's very Slint guitar passages that are going on here, and you get that kind of like similar vocal delivery, kind of like spoken, with these like guitar refrains and the math nature to it all. It's very Slint in the space it kind of holds, but I also noticed that the song incorporates like the violin and piano as it goes, like almost like the piano synths, like a keyboard, and it really starts to pull away from that sound and kind of like become something else. So this song musically to me almost felt like it starts as like a pretty standard kind of Slint song and evolves into something that's their own sound. And I think that there was an intentional narrative in this song to kind of curtail some of that critique, I think.
Yeah, I think what starts out as a Spiderland inspired song becomes something else, becomes something that belongs to the band themselves by the time you get to the end of the record, or by the to the end of the song, sorry. And I think that it's a testament to how well the band is able to conclude songs. I find the conclusions to all the songs to be pretty interesting. And here on this song, perhaps more than any other song, there's a lot of open space, and it's not very rhythmic. It's quite angular. The lyricist is filling in a lot of the empty room.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's almost his delivery is like spoken poetry almost. He
Right.
does have a very wide range.
Yeah, it's almost like he's reciting poetry, and then he gets kind of his performance in doing so escalates or becomes more manic in certain aspects of the song, and he'll portray emotions in that kind of way or melodrama in that way. But he's not really singing traditionally on this song or on this album.
No, and he does have a good tremble to his voice, which adds some emotion.
Hmm.
But we'll get to his singing voice and what we make of it a little bit later when we talk about some of the other tracks. But to go back to what I was saying about the conclusion, when we get to the end of this song, there's actually sort of beautiful, glittering, rhythmic guitar riff that plays for over a minute,
Hmm.
and it's a great contrast, or just it really stands out because of all the discordant, anti-rhythmic sounds that play throughout the song, and all the sort of not dead air, but open
Space.
space. Yeah.
Right. So I actually really enjoy the song. I like the atmosphere and the tone it gives off, and the kind of manic nature that his delivery gives to it. I should note at this point that this version on the album is not the original version that was released on EP back in 2019. There's a few changes to it, most notably some of the lyrics, and this ending that you mentioned is different.
Yeah.
Uh, the ending in the original version is a lot more drum focused and erratic in that drum nature, whereas in the new version, it's a little more toneful and moody. But I was kind of curious. I don't know why they changed it. Because in my opinion, the original is better. Uh,
I disagree, because especially when you consider the next song, how the next song begins with this
sure,
really stark guitar distortion, such a great contrast with the conclusion of the previous song.
sure. I was a huge fan of like the drum work that they did do on the original version, but also the lyrics were weird. He almost censors himself. You know, he kind of like completely takes out this subsection of lyrics in the song and replaces them with good lyrics, but like replaces the swearing and the crassness of talking about fucking a girl in her childhood bed. And he like kind of removes all that, and it feels like there was like this weird PG-ifying of the song that kind of came off a little odd to me. I don't know why it was done.
Did you read the lyrics for track X?
I did glance through the lyrics for track X. Yes,
Because the lyrics for that song refer to some childhood romance in a girl's bedroom.
right. And maybe I'm thinking of the lyrics from the wrong song.
Or
Um,
maybe you switched them around. That's what I was thinking.
so he changes the beginning of the song and like kind of takes out a subplot of it. So the original lyrics write, "She flies to Paris, France. I come down to her childhood bed. She tries to fuck me. I pretend that I'm asleep instead. She loves pulp culture. Just thank you next stuck in her head. The cursed vultures give me sourdough, my daily bread." And he changes it to "She flies to Paris, France. I come down to in her childhood bed and write the words one day I wish that I had never said. Now all that I become must die before the forum thread. The cursed vultures feed and spread the seeded daily bread." And it's like they're both like the second one is like lyrically dense and still compelling, but it just felt like a weird PG-ifying of the song that feels odd to me, and like restructuring. I'd like to know why this song was structured the way it was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was just trying to work on his lyricism. Because if I have one critique about the album, is this lyricism is not
It's not,
terribly sophisticated.
no, it's not terribly sophisticated. No, it's kind of direct in parts, but he's also like pretty interesting in other parts too. I don't think he's a bad writer. Um,
No, it's not bad. Lyrics consist of, sex, drugs, typical shit that you'd expect 20-year-olds to write about.
yeah, I guess so. It feels like there's a little bit more going on in some of these other tracks, with like Science Fair and yeah, maybe he's working on his writing. I don't think his writing is too bad. There's some variety in some of the other songs. I don't think it's too
This is not,
straightforward teenager stuff.
yeah, it's not an album I'm going to for the lyrics. The musicianship is so great on this record that I'm not paying attention to the lyrics that much, anyways.
You're right. You're 100% right. I wasn't paying attention too much to the lyrics either. A lot of my joy came from the instrumentals on this album and his vocal performance and the song structures. I think that's the what many person would really come to this for. I think the lyrics are kind of to the side. I don't think they're bad or anything or deserve being dismissed per se, but they're not the highlight here.
No, but they don't need to be, because it's not a band that centers around the vocalist and lyricism. It's a band that is really anchored in strong technical musicians, especially this drummer. I don't know, man, he can play. And then
Absolutely.
the combination of elements they have as a 7-piece band and how they're able to create compelling sequences and movements and how it oscillates and it's just it's a if you like jazz music, but then if you also like post punk and noise rock, you'll like this album. It
Absolutely.
bridges those two worlds of music together.
Right. I find that they are able to compose such gripping instrumentals that I think are perfectly paced. In fact, I think this album's one of his greatest compliments I can give it is how well paced I think this album is.
Yeah.
The next song, Science Fair. First time I listened to this, I got immediate Slint. So the first time I listened to the song, I actually got a weird like Slint. I know obviously Slint's going to come up a few times here because the comparison is thick, and even in the song, they name drop the band themselves in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way. But this song kind of like as it's talking about a science fair and meeting this girl and talking to this girl, I get real breadcrumb trail vibes in terms of like the lyrics here and kind of the tone. So I was a little like, I think they're doing that on purpose, especially with how the lyrics go to references and references and references that they drop in, even calling themselves the second best Slint tribute band. So I was like, okay, I kind of wish they didn't do that though. I kind of wish they just kind of left the topic alone. That I don't think they needed to do that little tongue-in-cheek eternalization of like this critique. I think it was better off just ignore it and just do your thing and write your music and be who you are and not give any attention to it, honestly. But minor complaint, they can do kind of whatever they want. Because the song evolves and is very different from Slint, and I think they prove it. The noise rock opening of this with the reverb and the wailing and the dissonant guitar opens this track, and I'm in love with that. So great with the noise rock influences. Once the vocals, go ahead.
They also use the violin on this track. I like the use of the violin on this track. It really helps add tension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as a step beyond what Slint did,
Right. I think the tension that's built on the song is one of its strengths as well, because I noted when the vocals come in after the opener, you find yourself in a very jittery and paranoid drum rhythm that kind of vaguely sounds like a panicked heart rate. And then like the singer is going on this manic diatribe as this is happening. And it was just like really compelling to listen to. It's like so hard to like not pay attention to the music when these interesting ideas are coming at you and these interesting sounds and these downtrodden kind of like guitar passages and this like kind of melodramatic kind of vocal delivery, kind of like ripping up this like manic person. I found it super compelling.
And then, all that said, at the end of this song, there's this groovy bass line. It doesn't last for long, but it's pretty groovy, and the bass is... The band doesn't rely so much on the bass. They have the drummer really hold the time and really help hold the rhythm.
Right,
But
that bass like kind of like a passage at the end was like super kind of like it almost sounded a little synthy. I don't know if it was a synth or not that was going on at the end there, but I also enjoyed it. It kind of felt a little different and fresh when it came on, because they hadn't really played with anything quite like that up until that point.
No, and the song is one of the more harsh sounding songs on the record. And so, but I don't know, they just understand. There's a sort of the way they are able to incorporate so many different tones into one song. It creates a great. The songs have a really great cadence, you know.
Mm-hmm. I just really enjoy the manic and nervous energy they properly build. They're like mastercrafts of like building these songs and having these several peaks throughout, like usually like a roller coaster. This is another great example of this song, how it'll peaks early and then kind of goes into that groovy rhythm and then peaks again with the strings at the end, and it all throughout has this kind of like building manic nature that I find super compelling.
And so, what did you make of the next song, Sunglasses?
Sunglasses is another song that actually changed from the original, but I didn't listen to the original and kind of like let it be. Musically, I'm super big fan of the heavy effects and the pedal and guitar work that are kind of shoegazy on this track, or at least in the beginning there. The song develops, and we get a lot of like cleaner, plucked melodies, and it's kind of like a really slow burn song. I believe this is like the longest song, maybe 8 minutes.
Is it
Yeah,
longer than? Yeah, Sunglasses is almost 10 minutes. Yeah, 9 minutes.
the highlight of the song to me, and I want to kind of like put a little attention on it, is the refrain on this track, where the music builds and swells and peaks in the first verse, and it feels scrambled and disorganized, and with amazing sax work that is definitely like No Wave, as I said, influence. It's very dissonant. It brings the song to its like early peaks as it's building the song. The second part of the song has this pulse. It's because it's kind of like a two-part song. I kind of look at it as two parts because there's a kind of like a clear separation in the middle. So the second part kind of has this pulsating drum beat that just rebuilds to another fantastic sax sputtering out in this bass and drum line, and it fits super well. They broaden themselves, like doing this like no wave stuff with the sax and like bringing in the violin. I think it does so much to like separate them from their peers and their contemporaries, like Black Midi and Slint, and these comparisons. Like
Yeah,
while I can hear these like influences on their sleeve, and I tell that they're in that same kind of genre. It's the sax work, I think, primarily, and the violin work that really brings it a different soundscape within that pocket.
well, it makes them so much more diverse. They have so much more versatility, simply because they are able to use those two instruments, and those instruments work so well within the post-punk, math rock, noise rock, those intersecting genres, and they're sort of the first ones to say, "Hey guys, look at this. Bring in the sax. Bring in a really talented drummer. Bring in the violin, and you can create incredible layers of sound."
Absolutely.
And
Uh,
the end of this song gets super chaotic, and everyone's essentially playing in different time.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but they are then somehow able to bring it all back together, so then everyone's playing harmoniously just towards the end.
Mhm.
Incredibly skillful.
Absolutely. I think I don't think anybody can go into this album and leave disappointed with the craftsmanship of the instrumentals on this album.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And the way they sequence the songs, like you mentioned earlier, the song almost has two halves. It's like it has there's a first movement, and then there's this very no wavy dissonant sax section when
Hmm.
everything fades out, and then the drums kick in, and it almost begins this second movement of the song,
Right,
and
right.
it's really noisy, and in that section. And then I find they always mark the endings of the songs, and that's to me is part of the band's jazz training. A lot of all jazz songs have very like they mark the endings, and I find they have a sort of technical approach to how they compose the songs
Mm-hmm.
that is perhaps maybe a little bit lost on their peers, but
Yeah.
it makes the songs so good to listen to.
I was talking about the pacing of the album a little earlier, so I think this next track, track X, is a perfect example of a perfectly placed song.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
This song comes in between two long behemoth tracks, and is completely different from everything else on the album. It's got this like uh, little tune with this driving guitar that's kind of like melancholy actually, and it goes into this mood range that the album really hadn't uh, experimented with it up until this point. It's a little more almost at points where because it brings in like a female vocalist as well, and with the swelling horns. I had a little taste of a Suf Jam on this track actually.
Sooth Jam? I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that, but
Maybe like Suf Jam, as a evil brother, but he's kind of in that realm, I think with the being able to like to use the brass and like the harmony and the female backing vocals. I thought it was a little similar.
it certainly is a song that has harmony because of the melancholy, almost emo guitar riff, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And the saxophone too is very tender, and it's almost a little bit dreamy and bright. And the backup vocals on top of that creates a nice sense of unity in the song. It sounds very harmonious. It's a little like opium shot, just it sort of eases you, relaxes you before prepares you is what it does
Right.
for the opus, which is the concluding track.
I also noted that this track was so measured, where all the other tracks on the album, like they build and kind of hit these climactic points. This song stays measured throughout. It's like a stable heartbeat, and it just keeps its pace, and it doesn't suffer from it or anything like that. It exists in this different song structure area that I thought was very intentional. It just kind of like felt like a palate cleanser. I wouldn't have pointed this song out as a favorite of mine in a vacuum, but in terms of mechanics and of how to put an album together, I think this song is uh, the cornerstone of the second half of the album.
Yeah, it's I would say the most accessible track on the record too. However, perhaps the biggest anomaly. But going back to what I've said a couple on previous episodes of the podcast, this track loses some of its power, even though it's a great song, when you take it outside of the context of the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a song that like really exists as a part of the album as a whole. It's not one of those
Mhm.
songs I think that you could really take out as a deep cut and like kind of showcase the band. I think it's really like it's holding up a part of the album on its back, and it does a great job kind of like mechanically as a song, even though it's still enjoyable. I don't want to undersell what it's doing in terms of actual song, but in terms of like pacing, I thought this was really great, uh, completely different, right? It gave us a different palette, a little more melancholy and upper than some of the other ones. Not quite happy, it's kind of in that somber range. Um, it just kind of gives us a little bit of a palate cleanser before we go into Opus.
Hold on. Oh yes, I also like the way this song ends. Again, the saxophone is leading, but then it passes off to the keyboard and lets the keyboard take ownership of the ending as the song fades out, and yeah, it gives it this shoegazy type of feel. And again, yeah, very distinct track on the record, perfectly placed. And in the band's future recordings, I'd be interested to hear maybe another song like this. Maybe they have two songs like this on the record. You know, if they do a longer record, or yeah, whatever they do, I'd be interested to hear more of this sound from the band as well.
Absolutely, it shows their diversity. It really does.
Yeah.
That's why I really think it's unfair. People who do critique them as being too derivative. I think that's someone who hasn't really listened to the album, because I think this is obviously takes those slint guitar passages. I think that's the biggest culprit for this comparison. But the rest of it, I think it's its own beast.
For sure, it is Slint inspired, but I would also there's also some cool guitar riffs on this record too that are the band's own and gets away from Slint sound, like it gets away from the math rock sound.
Right. So Opus is another one of those build songs, and it's great. It does a good job of it. They got an amazing skill of it. They have this like Arabian flair on the sax in the song. I don't know how else to describe it. You know what I mean? It's got this,
Arabian flair on the sax.
yeah, it's got this like almost like Middle Eastern kind of rhythm to it, and melody to it, groovy and
I don't
tasty.
if I'd call it Arabian. It's definitely got a groove though. Like I said that it gave me a bop. Like when I was listening to it, I was bopping along to the song.
Right. It's got a lot of energy to it, and it kind of feels inspired. I really enjoyed the work of the sax on this. It's actually like a crucial part of how the song builds as well, because they come back to it in the later half.
I really like the introduction to this song. They're playing these really fast and snapping guitar chords, and then the drummer's just hitting the hi-hat, and they do that for the first minute, and it just builds this tension like, oh yeah, this is the concluding track, you know, you've made it, you're here it comes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was great.
There's I want to take a special note of the build in the outro of the song. The tones on the guitar, they really incite this feeling of rising tension in the way that they're kind of put together. Like the final hit on that note is like almost not concluding, so it's like it keeps like playing over and over and giving you this feeling like something more. And like after a few seconds of that, like the drum will come in like boom boom boom, and just like kind of take the a burst of energy before it goes back and kind of like rebuilds itself up again, but like keeps doing it, does like 2 or 3 times before it like hits this increasing crescendo there in the outro. Everything's like coming to a head, and Isaac grows increasingly manic in his performance, and then that's when they finally bring back those horns and combine it with the new rhythm that they've been working with in this build. And it's like such a great, beautiful music moment, and like it's such a highlight on the record for me.
Yeah, the build towards the end on this song reminded me a lot of the chaotic build on Science Fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very angular. Everyone's playing almost in different time. To go back to the first half of the song, the saxophone player is really the star on the first half. After that introduction with the guitar and the hi-hat, then the sax just sort of takes over, like it comes in with a vengeance.
Right, absolutely. I honestly want to say the sax player is the MVP on the whole album.
Uh,
That's kind of how I feel about the sax.
I could certainly agree with that. He definitely kills it. Everyone kills it. The drummer does a great job. When I
Yeah.
listened to the first track, instrumental, I thought the drummer was going to be the
Right.
star of the septet, but no, man, it's the sax player for sure.
The drum, like they all do their job, and they all have these moments of like real highlights. But the way that the saxophone is incorporated in the album as a whole, I think does so much more for the palette of the band and the music that they're composing. But yeah, I find that does so much more for the band to stand out. The drums are amazing, absolutely, and there's points, including the first track, where they are mind blowing, and the kind of like the rhythms that they keep and the time he's keeping. He's clearly skilled, but I think the sax nudges him out just a smidge.
This last track, it really seals him as the star of the album. And that's not taking anything away from any of the other performances, but it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of the vocals on this track?
I like his vocals on every track. They are very spoken, but I like that. I enjoy the way that he delivers it. As long as you can deliver an emotional performance or incite emotion in me, I'm down. I'm into the vocals. I know that it's not exactly a sing-songy, and he's got this kind of like really dramatic or melodramatic kind of vibrato when he does bring it out, like it's shaken or he's like shivering while he's like singing. But I feel like it brings out the manic nature and the kind of like unhingedness to the sound of the music comes out as well in his vocals. And so I was a big fan of the vocals.
Yeah, the vocals probably, and they're not bad, but I would say maybe the weakest element of the band. And Athens, France, I didn't really like the vocals on that track, and it bummed me out a little bit because thought, oh man, the album got off to such a great start, but if the vocals are gonna sort of stay like this, I don't know. The music's compelling, but the vocal performance is going to be disappointing. However, on Opus, it was my favorite vocal performance on the record, and I think it's because during the noisy section on the second half of the song, he really lets his voice go, where on other tracks he didn't.
Right.
Though,
It's kind of like the climax almost of the album, the way that he kind of releases himself in that like that 6 minute range on the last track.
yeah, like his voice never really gets super loud, but this section of this song, and maybe appropriately so, like you just said, it emphasizes the conclusion of the album. But he never really lets himself get loud. He has this trembling texture to his voice that we mentioned before, but where he has such a narrow range, I wanted something more out of his vocal performance that I just wasn't getting, but I get it here on this track.
Okay.
And so yeah, going forward on other records, I'd like to see some louder vocals or something just some more compelling vocals.
Some more pep in the vocals, maybe.
Yeah, just some sort of energy. I sort of found the vocals were almost they were almost a little bit sleepy.
Yeah, I kind of like how they sound though, like the kind of mood they give off, and that's kind of the way I approach it, because it kind of sounds like sometimes just this monologue or diatribe of this person like on the hinge of like crashing over into that emotional state, and then finally does on this final track where he does explode and like his voice comes out, and I think it adds more emphasis to that moment. And it's not that I don't think he does. I think he does good jobs portraying like these manic and crazed moments during like climax of songs building up to this too. But he doesn't go to that next level until the end there. But I kind of think it all fits into like the build of the album, and I like it. I like the mood, mostly what he portrays here.
Yeah, his voice certainly fits the mood, especially of those yeah, angular tracks where there's a lot more room. Uh, his voice definitely hits the mood. It's just I just want a little. I want him to stretch it out a little bit more.
Sure. So you listened to this album, I think, before I put it forward to you. Is that right?
No, I encountered this album listening to BBC Six earlier this month. They played it on the new releases of the week channel, and I think maybe I had mentioned it to you, or I'm not sure, but I had heard. I think it was Athens, France.
Okay, that would make sense. I was just wondering because I figured I was like, how much did you think I would like this album? Because this everything on this album is really in my pocket of bands I like and sounds I like.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it to you, I think.
Right. And I think there's a bit of bias because this is strictly my kind of music. Uh, the kind of like stuff I would really like associate with like my favorite kind of music. So a little biased, I think, but I really enjoyed this album.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I was really excited to talk about it. And even though, yeah, it's a post-punk, noise rock, math rock album, it made I was going back and listening to jazz standards earlier in the week because of the jazz influence on this record. Just got me excited about jazz again.
Yeah. So what would you first let's go. What is your toe in song? I think this is a weird album to have a toe in song because it's such a cohesive piece.
So,
But I think if you were to grab a track to emphasize the entirety of the album, where would you go?
ooh, hmm. You know, I don't know how representative instrumental is of the entire record, but
Mhm.
it is a super fun song to listen to, and it's 5 minutes and 27 seconds, which is the second shortest track on the album, so accessible lengthwise. If not, I would say probably Science Fair.
I would, yeah, I'd probably agree with Science Fair. It'd either be Science Fair or Sunglasses.
Yeah.
None of these tracks are misses. I think they're all hits. I honestly think you could probably spin a roulette, land on one, and probably do a good job because there's enough variety and diversity here through even just on a song that to encapsulate the entire album in one track a little harder to do. But I think Science Fair is probably a good toe-in song. What would you rate this song, album overall?
The album's definitely a 9.
Yeah, I
If
agree.
if I like the vocals better, I'd say 10.
I was a little peeved on Athens, France, and the rewrite, and I thought the performance was a little less edgy, and I thought the ending kind of preferred the drums. So I was a little annoyed there. Again, some of the lyrics could probably be a little better, but I generally really enjoyed this. I'm only kind of like really looking for complaints.
Yeah. Yeah, like, we were talking about the vocals. It's that's sort of nitpicking.
Yeah,
Like, the record is so solid, and these tracks are long, yeah, sure, but actually none of them feel that long because the band consistently has new ideas, they introduce them in interesting ways. It gets noisy, it gets quiet. What's
yeah.
not to like?
It's easy. It's easy to be listening to a build to us in a song and look and realize you're 4 minutes in and not even realize it. It's super compelling. It's like a fine film that's just gripping you with confusing and interesting and vibrant images and keeping you hooked all along the way.
And I think you can like I would love to see this band live. You can really tell with the way the songs are. They were a band who cultivated their sound, playing live shows and doing improvisation and so on.
Yeah. So I think this might be one of the highest scored cumulatively between me and you we've ever given an album.
I would say so far this is the album of the year.
Yeah, this is. I was thinking actually. Sometimes I like to compare where would I have placed this album on my previous year's album of the year, and I actually had that thought with this, and it's easily in the top 5.
Yeah.
So, early contender, early contender.
It's so unique that I don't know. I don't expect to hear anything that's gonna rival the uniqueness of their sound. Like
Well, we got Shoo coming up.
what?
We got Shoo Shoo coming up.
Shoo, that is true. And all duets on that album. There's a
Never, never question the uniqueness that can be had when Shoo Shoo has got an album dropping.
that's true. That's true. I find Shoo Shoo can sometimes be a little bit esoteric. Like they're a little bit niche sometimes. But their last record is actually probably my favorite record of theirs.
Yeah, probably. So again, I think we're going to have an extra episode coming up. Not sure exactly the release date. We're going to type in a few albums that we haven't had a chance to talk about in long form. Go over them a little bit of a omnibus style and talk about them. I think Zach's got a few albums he wants to talk about, and a few albums that I've been wanting to talk about, but couldn't quite find the time for full reviews of them. So we're going to have a little extra episode to cover a little bit of the albums that we want you to listen to and don't let pass you by as the year passes.
Or ones that maybe have caught your attention or you didn't realize released and put you on notice, whether or not they're worth your time.
Whether they're worth your time or you just need to pass them, give them the heave or the skip until the next album. We'll see how it goes. I'm not sure exactly what albums you want to cover yet, so it'll be interesting to hear your pitch for some of these songs or some of these albums that you might come to me with.
I'm definitely gonna check out the new Nick Cave Warren Ellis record that released just today. I'm gonna it'll be a surprise. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be a surprise. But I think it'll be a fun little aside from our regular episodes.
Yeah, there's something short, snappy, quick, sweet.
Nothing will be as snort as you, my friend.
Anyways, yeah.
Right.
So, Black Country New Road. What a debut record.
Absolutely. Go listen to it. Go pick it up. Get it on vinyl.
Yeah, definitely a record worth getting on vinyl.
Well, I guess we'll see you guys next on this next episode. Like I said, not sure when it's gonna drop, but keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, keep an eye out and see you then.